Imagine 4,000 people
Mm-hmm.
speaking to on an average about 20 customers a day. So that's 40,000, 80,000
80,000.
customers, an average of 5 minutes, let's say, or 7 minutes or 10 minutes. So that's 500,000 minutes of
Talk
call
time, actually.
voice data every day.
Yeah.
And that starts to become massive.
Hi everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Leading with Data. Today I have Naveen with me. Naveen is co-founder and CEO of Paisabazaar, which is India's largest independent credit marketplace. Naveen and I go long time back. So he was one of my early managers at Capital One, then at Aviva Life Insurance. He was also the first investor I had at Analytics Vidhya. Today, Paisabazaar is more than 4,000 people, more than 36 million customers, and one of the few listed tech companies in India. I'm personally excited to have Naveen on the show, and I think there is immense amount of learning we can have from him about his journey as a leader and use of analytics and data science during this process. So, welcome Naveen to the show.
Thank you, Kunal. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Naveen, let's start with early days and how did you get into banking and financial services and analytics specifically? So how did it start?
The banking and financial services was a pure accident. When I graduated from IIM Calcutta, I was very, very interested about understanding and working in consumer behavior category and marketing. And so, as with any young graduate, our dream companies were FMCG companies like Levers, P&G. Citibank happened through campus placement. Uh, Accidentally, it turned out to be a great accident, and then defined my career for the next 21 plus years. And I've always stayed in consumer finance. And analytics was again, and I think something that I picked up when I did my stint in Capital One UK, where we worked together. My first 6 years were in Citibank India, where India at 2001 to 7 was very underpenetrated. Digital was very small. Internet was a hobby more than part of a business. And hence data analytics was not that strong. There were functions like credit, risk, where data was used far more extensively, but not mainstream outside of those functions. However, when I went to UK to work with Capital One, it was a completely different way of working, where I realized that even if I was more on the business side, which used to be called as marketing analytics function in Cap One, everybody was attuned to and was supposed to look at a lot of data and use a lot of data to drive their decisions and actions. And in that sense, it was very, very different in terms of the org structure itself versus other banks, whether it was Citi or HSBC or any other bank. And I think that was where I first got introduced to analytics and understood the value of and the benefit of using analytics and data to drive your decisions.
Great. And then how was that transition going from a very business oriented setup to a place where analytics and data science is almost ingrained into every aspect? Was it challenging at first, or and how did you adopt to it?
Yeah, no, great question. The reason I took up the role was to go deeper in the credit cards business, which I was working in while at Citibank also, and to learn newer skills, to work in a different market, which was far more mature digitally. And so when I moved, of course, initially it was tough, but when I look back, it turned out to be very, very valuable in how it shaped my thinking, how it helped me in taking more uh, better data driven decisions and eventually better decisions, and use, of course, a lot of business instinct, but have data backing some of those. I remember when I moved in not as an analyst, I moved in as a manager of analysts. So that part was not easy, to be honest, because I didn't have background in data analytics, and I couldn't write the code myself. And I was managing people who were born and brought up in that, from a work perspective, in a modeling data analytics perspective. So it took a little bit of time to understand how and what all can be done using data, what techniques can be used, what are the pros and cons and benefits of different techniques. And so it was a very, very sharp learning curve, and challenging initially. But like I said, over the next 15, 16 years, it really, really added value to me as a professional in terms of my decision making abilities.
Very interesting. So in those few months, you were in a new geography, a new setup in terms of how the business operates, and you were also working with a very different team than what you were used to. And, great. And then anything in particular which helped you kind of navigate during that period, which you can remember? Or
couple of things. It was, while it was very different geography and different company, like you said, and different way of working. It was the credit cards business at the core of it, which I had worked in for about 6 years. So I think that was one thing that was helpful. The second thing was that I believed, and I think I have a very, very good business instinct and a very good understanding from the perspective of what questions to ask. And even though you're not technically very sound, I was not earlier from a data analytics perspective, but I knew that. So how does these things impact the business, and what's the right area to look at, and what's the right question to ask? So those things help. And surprisingly, completely away from work, when I was in UK, we really loved it personally. I was newly married, so I and my wife loved staying in UK, and I think being at a very, very good place personally does have an effect on you professionally in terms of easing in to the
very
role.
Interesting. And then when and why did you kind of decide to move back to India?
Oh yeah. So while I think Capital One was a great experience from getting a perspective on how you could use data as a primary driver of decision making, and just a completely objective meritocratic way of working. It was also 2007 to 9, which was a very tough period from a credit perspective. We saw global financial crisis unveiling at some point in 2007 end, I think, when Lehman failed. And so for all financial companies, including Capital One, which had their primary country as US, it was tough times for business. UK was about 1/10 of US business. So Capital One, like a lot of other companies, was trying to protect its core, which was US market. And so they were actually trying to sell the UK business. And they were very transparent about that. That was another great thing about the company, that very, very transparent organization. So they were very transparent about it. But when they were trying to sell the business, it meant that, of course, the environment was not very, very positive, not very growth oriented. And thankfully, they could not sell it, which turned out great for them. But in that time and in that global financial crisis, I thought it might be better to look back at a growing market like India, and a newer sector like insurance, which was, really just opening up in India and was a sunrise industry 4 or 5 years into opening, which is why I decided to come back.
So at Aviva, you were then looking after marketing as well as analytics, right? And now in a different industry, right? So how was that early period in insurance, and how was that experience?
So when I came back to India again, I think I knew that it's a very different market. It was a new industry for me this time, for the first time, but the basics of the business was similar. Thankfully, I got the opportunity to set up two functions initially, and then the third one all from scratch, which also has been my strength as a professional. I set up the cross sell vertical first, where there was none in the company. I then set up analytics Vidhya, which is where analytics function, which is where you and Sarvesh joined, both of you from Cap One, and we together. I know that we're very excited about
Correct.
what analytics can do, given where India was in terms of usage of analytics, and insurance was. I mean, insurance was a step behind banks in terms of using data analytics to drive its decisions, and so got a chance to set up that. So it was exciting from both perspectives. Doing what I really loved, which was setting some things from scratch, even though it were within the company, and really got the opportunity to apply my learnings at Capital One, and uh, using analytics to help the company start thinking about using more analytics to take decisions. India at that point, before that, a lot of businesses in India tends to have intuition as a dominating variable versus data. It's changing now, of course, with since over the last 7-8 years, but it's still kind of evolving. So yeah, so that those parts, the excitement of setting something from scratch, excitement of applying the learnings from what I learned at Capital One, and really adding value to Indian ecosystem and a company in insurance in a slightly different way of thinking and taking decisions was very exciting.
And then in 2014, early 2014, you decided to move out, and you went to Policybazaar for a brief period, and then also started Paisabazaar in parallel. Right. So what was the thought behind it, and then what triggered that?
Yeah, sure. So in Aviva, when I started, I set up analytics and cross-sell as the first two functions. But about 2 years later, digital was starting to become meaningful. The first digital product in life insurance was launched by a competitor, Egon Religier, in 2011. And it was still very small, but there was excitement around what was happening in digital. If you remember, Flipkart and Amazon was probably not there, or was there. Flipkart was set up in 2008-9, so it was emerging very as a category. Travel, Make My Trip, etc. were emerging and growing. So it was overall digital was becoming exciting, still early. And so when I got a chance to set up digital business for Aviva, that was an exciting part. And over the next 2 years, what we did at Aviva, the digital team, that while Aviva as a company was very middle of rung, like out of the 24 insurance players, we were ranked number 13 or 14, depending on the quarter, on the overall business. But within a few months of launching digital business, we became number one in digital, and we stayed there for the next couple of years. And during that journey, Policybazaar, which was a financial marketplace for insurance products, again a very young company at that point, still trying to find its feet and figure out the models, they became an important partner for our digital business scale up.
Correct.
And Yashish, who's the founder of Policybazaar, and I interacted a lot during that phase because we were driving each other's growth. And we were both very critical partners to each other in terms of driving digital business. And during that time, and then I looked back at what was happening in UK when I was in UK in Capital One. About 55% or 60% maybe
of from digital
or credit cards acquisition came from digital channel. The remaining were coming from direct mailers, etc. For a non-bank. Capital One was a non-bank, non-branch bank. And so UK was one of the most mature markets. So I saw that, and I saw out of the digital business, most of it, bulk of it, came through comparison platforms, which was again very mature in UK. And again, a majority of that was coming from the market leader, Money Supermarket. And I thought of that scale on where the market or a comparison platform can go if it executes well in a market like India. And because of the way I built the digital business, it looked like a very exciting opportunity to join Paisabazaar, do again something that I loved and I thought I was good at, which was set up Paisabazaar from zero to one, and having clarity and support of where it can go, and do it with a company which had some funding sorted. So I was not kind of doing some parts of it like fundraising, etc. That's the reason I decided to jump and join and set up Paisabazaar. Initially, when I joined, you're right that the role was the head of marketing, CMO for Paisabazaar, and setting up Paisabazaar. The CMO for Paisabazaar was more a backstop in case Paisabazaar fails, doesn't fly. It was a fallback or a fail-safe option for me, and I did that for 2-3 years till Paisabazaar reached a certain scale. But yeah.
And starting something from scratch to taking it where it is today, so more than 4,000 employees, India's largest credit marketplace. Can you tell this journey and how have you evolved as a leader during this period?
Yeah, it's a interesting and tough question. And like I said, that when I look back, it's easier to answer in hindsight. That while before Paisabazaar, I had worked in large organizations, so Citibank, Capital One, and Aviva. But somehow, both in Citi and Aviva, I got an opportunity to do some things from scratch. I remember fresh out of IIM Calcutta, first year into the job, I was asked to set up Vizag market for Citibank for credit cards business. And Citibank was not present in the city. The model usually for MNC banks that time was that credit cards becomes the first business to go and set up a market, and then other asset products follow. And I remember that period, which was I was very nervous, but I really enjoyed that phase of setting up Vizag market for Citi. And then, like I talked about, Aviva experience. So I think that part is always exciting, and I feel very humbled and grateful to get the opportunity and to have taken the decision. When I look back now, we completed 9 years recently, to start something from scratch, take it to the position we have taken it to, and now we've got another validation in terms of getting listed publicly, and public is our shareholder of the group. The business aspects of that have remained fairly consistent in terms of when we started, we knew that as digital evolves, the need for consumers in India to compare any product, not a financial, but any product, is very high. We are a very value economy or a value-based country. So we try and find the best deal in everything that we do. So if we could do our job well as a marketplace, bring together all the players, now we have 60 plus partners in one place, and make it easier for consumer to choose the right product, we would succeed. So that was a basic principle or the fundamental principle at the back of the mind. I also knew that India is a very financially less literate, if I could use that word, market. And the financial awareness continues to be very low. The financial product penetration continues to be very low. And when as a manufacturer somebody is explaining a product to the consumer, they always have some bias.
Right.
So if we could emerge as an independent marketplace who don't have a bias for a product, but they have a bias for doing the right advice to the consumer, that's another reason we would succeed if we do that job well. And of course, we've had a lot of tailwind in terms of what's happened to firstly digital economy with e-commerce companies, e-commerce and travel leading the way, and then somebody like Geo and other telecom players driving the internet usage and the internet on mobile usage and really expanding the usage over the last 7-8 years, maybe more. And then finally, the tailwind of the country and the government creating the digital ecosystem, first through the broadband expansion, but then through the India stack, where creating a digital identity for 150 crores now people. And imagine before 2012-13 we did not have a way to easily validate a digital identity in a digital fashion. To create that infrastructure, and now over the last 3-4 years to create the KYC infrastructure, to now creating a account aggregator, they all helping. And of course in the middle the UPI, which moved so many people, millions of people, from physical financial transactions to digital financial transactions, thereby making them more aware, more comfortable. And eventually it helps all digital companies, which we are seeing now, and it helped us also. So some of those factors I think have been at the center of why we've managed to do what we've done. I think one more factor that I should talk about, and is a very important factor that's kind of played a great role in my journey, or in Paisabazaar's journey, is that getting the right people very, very early, and more importantly, they sticking it out with you and with the company. So of our leadership team, while we are 4,000 plus people, like you said, if I look at the top 20-25 people in the company today, almost all of them, actually all of them, have been handpicked and hired without any consultant in the middle, which means that I or somebody else in my team had a sense of who they are, and about their value system, about what their strengths and opportunities are, and that's helped us. And then of course that team that has stuck together for most of the leadership team is spent more than 8 years in our 9-year journey, 7 years in a 9-year journey. So I think some of those factors have really helped.
Wow. And this decision to kind of go through the listing process, how was that experience? How was and did it influence the way you were kind of thinking and growing the company?
Yeah. Okay. So I think first the rationale for why listing, I think across the world, but even more so in India, getting listed is a huge validation of your business model, of the sustainability of your business model, although nothing is permanent. But so I think those somewhere were strong reasons on why we wanted to get listed and get validated as a business, get to the next level as a business, and the opportunity to list in India. If you think, if you see that, it was not very easy for a loss-making digital company to list in India. I think before 2020, or
and even today, there are very few companies who are
digital companies who are listed. But I think some of the regulations required you to be profitable for a certain number of years before you can get listed, and the regulators were progressive enough to see what's happening in the digital ecosystem, and the fact that they need to relax certain requirements that allowed companies like us to list in the market where we operate. We totally operate in India, and so that was a rationale somewhere. And post listing, I think, if anything, it has really helped us. Although, of course, initially in preparation of that, there were a little bit of distraction. Of course, there's a lot of time that goes in preparing for that, in doing the things that you normally would not do in business processes, etc. But it's all hopefully for the better. But post that, I believe that a couple of things have happened which are positive for us as a company. The first thing is that we have become far more disciplined.
Sure.
We'd like to say that we were disciplined anyways, but I think that has helped us in the sense that as an unlisted, fast-growing technology company, the optionality between growth, focusing on profitability. If it was very dominant towards growth, some of it is a matter of time also. So if we were private today, even then we would have moved more towards profitability. But I think being publicly listed helped. Moving towards profitability, starting to balance out both growth and profitability as a metric in our thinking, and driving it across the organization as a way of thinking. That's been one big help. And the second big help has been the transparency. And sometimes, that's the thing about data, that sometimes people who do have data or who do data analytics tend to think that or tend to worry about sharing the data, sharing the analysis out in open for various reasons. And we used to do that, and anybody who is not listed tends to do that, whether it's competition, whether it's sharing too much variables in industry, etc. But once you're public, you have to share a certain amount of data every quarter, maybe more frequently, and that in some sense actually unburdens you, because you share so much data, you start to become more transparent. You don't have to worry about what data are you talking or sharing with what person, and what person you should not be sharing it with. I think that somewhere just takes something out of your mind and gives space to the mind for other things.
Great. And I would just want to go through this journey of setting up from scratch to reaching this stage, from some of the decisions you would have made during this process, right? So as a digital company, you would obviously be very data driven from day one. But when did you kind of start putting an explicit data science practice, and what were those important milestones or steps where you said that analytics and data science have to play a definitive role in the journey?
No, that's a great question, Kunal. So what continues to be true, and it was more true back in 2014, more so even earlier, is that in India the penetration of financial products especially is so low, and you see so much opportunity intuitively that and you always, as a company or as individual, have limited bandwidth. So the initial part in any journey, there's just so much intuition and under penetration at play that the data adds very little incremental value. And that was our beginning of the journey, where we saw just so much opportunity, so much gaps in terms of what consumers would benefit by and what was not available, that it was just down to, let's do those basics right, prove the basic hypothesis, prove the business models, get our parent Paisabazaar more confident about the opportunity, get our investors more confident about the opportunity. That initial part was without a lot of data analytics to be
You would still be doing the funnel analysis, drop-offs.
We'll be doing basic data analytics. Of course, we'll be doing, because we were digital first and digital only company. So the basic data analytics was always happening.
Sure.
But to be able to and I use the word data science carefully.
Yeah.
So we were doing data analytics, not data science as I would
Got
think
it. Mm-hmm.
in the initial period, because the opportunity was so massive. But once we reached, there were 2-3 trigger points.
Mm-hmm.
One is usually when you hit a certain scale.
Correct.
And that's when the importance of data improving your productivity, efficiency, effectiveness, funnels starts to become large enough for you to not ignore,
Right.
and it'll hurt you otherwise. So that's usually one trigger point, a natural trigger point. We had another trigger point, which was that we are a lending marketplace. One of the things about a credit product versus a credit product marketplace versus any other marketplace is that, for example, if you go to Flipkart or Amazon,
Mm-hmm.
as a consumer, you will choose amongst various options, or you will see various options
Right.
which they list. You will decide what you like, you will see the price, and you will pay and get that product.
Mm-hmm.
So you are the decision maker as a consumer. In credit, you will see as a consumer the various options, but you actually do not decide which one do you get.
Yeah.
You can decide which one do you
To
want,
apply. Yeah.
but whether you get that or not is actually the seller's decision, which is
Correct.
a bank or a NBFC. And hence, it became very important that as marketplace, we don't only focus on features or pricing, uh, but we also focus on something called as chance of approval.
Sure.
Which is that where are you likely to get the product? You might like HDFC Bank, but they're not going to give you the loan or the card. Is a different lender the right lender for you?
Mm-hmm.
That the consumer typically does not know.
Correct.
And that was our job as independent marketplace working for consumers, and nobody was doing it in the country. It was too obvious not to do it. So as soon as we realized that part, the data analytics became so critical, because to figure out which is the right product for which consumer. Imagine the complexity, right? We have consumer segments and we had 20 plus lender in any category.
Correct.
So we're trying to build analytics model for each of those 20 lenders in terms of chance of approval, and then translating into a chance of approval score for each lender for a particular consumer. That's where I think our data analytics strategy, besides the core basic data analytics, digital data analytics, started to take shape. And I think,
what year was this? How many years into the journey was this?
I think it was between 2015 and 16.
Sure. Okay.
So about 1.5 year into the journey, when we got the initial scale, built the initial basic building blocks, had enough lender partnerships, started to get enough consumers, and started to actually got some of those feedbacks, and saw a lot of data where people were just applying to the wrong lender.
And just for context, enough customers would be a few 100,000 people.
100,000 plus, I would think, in terms of inquiry. Maybe thereabouts. Thereabouts.
So it was still considerable scale from a data perspective.
It was a decent scale, and we saw the cost to the consumer, to us, to the lender, of taking a wrong decision, applying to the wrong lender. And we also, on the flip side, saw that if we could get it right, the benefit to everybody. And it kind of hit a threshold beyond which we also had the basics, to be honest. We also had the basic business going, and hence there was enough revenue coming in to be able to invest in a data analytics, which always was and continues to be a very, very expensive way to build capability. They of course, it continues to be a high demand, low supply, category. So very difficult to find great analytics people, and they tend to be more expensive. So yeah, that was a trigger point. There was another trigger which kind of led to expansion, which was the launch of our credit score product, but I can talk about that later.
Yeah, in fact, I remember a few points. So one, I don't know if you would remember, 2016-17, we did a hackathon on analytics with Vidhya as well about probability of people to buy on leads.
Yeah.
And then the credit product, I remember you had, I think, launched this free CIBIL check, and you were getting again a few 100,000 applications every month.
Yeah.
And can you talk a bit about the scale? Because I remember this was, I think, 2018. I was 17 and or 18. You were like getting millions of applications, and then there were various touch points. So that entire data infrastructure strategy, how did that come together? Any specific points you remember?
Yeah. So the free credit score product and the origination of that is driven by two trigger points. One was a more personal anecdote. When I relocated from UK to India, I was out for 2 years. I applied for a home loan, and I was very confident. I had identified the property, and at the last minute, I remember it was SBI. They said that you can't be given a home loan. Your application cannot be processed because you have a problem in your credit score.
Right.
And that was a surprise because I was out of the country. I knew people in CIBIL, so I got my credit report. Eventually found that they had mixed up two different names, and then they corrected it, so was able to get it. But the process of getting the credit report was that the bank will never share it with you because it's for their consumption. It's not a consumer credit report. So they're not supposed to. They don't share it. And as a consumer, when I tried to get it, it took me 2 couriers. So I had to courier an application form, courier a demand draft.
Physically.
It was physical. Physical application form, a demand draft for 400 rupees.
Wow.
And CIBIL's office was in Bombay. I was in Gurgaon. So couriered that to them. They couriered back the report, and the entire process took about 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
And 400 rupees to get to know my credit score. This was in 2009-10. I didn't do anything because I was in insurance at that point anyways. And then when we started Paisabazaar, there was a company in US, Credit Karma, which actually pioneered this concept in the world, I think. They were running this free credit score product, and one of our investors was common, so we were able to go see the scale at which they had built this. And then I thought that in a market like India, which has low credit awareness, it's an even more powerful product.
Correct.
And then we started working with the bureaus the first bureau was not CIBIL, it was Equifax, I think. And we started building the product with them, worked really hard to build that. And we launched that finally in 2017, I think, about six years ago.
Sure.
And when we launched it, the product, suddenly from a 400 rupee, 2 couriers, 7 days, it became 2 minutes, 5 fields, free, and free for life.
Wow.
With a monthly refresh. So as expected, the consumers just loved it and lapped that product up. We suddenly started getting lakhs of inquiries a month, and people started valuing that. And by the way, we knew that that's going to help our core business.
Yeah.
As people get more aware, they will know that where are they on the credit ladder and what's the right product for them to apply for, and if they're not at the right place, then what can they do to improve. And it helped us in our overall funnels. But as we started doing that, each credit report, each credit product report is about 400 plus variables.
Correct.
And after a certain point, we were working with all the 4 credit bureaus, and we were updating the data every month. So very soon, the data was becoming massive. 400 variables for a customer. Remember, we talked about how do we manage so much data way back in 2017. and it was we were adding those variables on a monthly basis, and then it became 4 bureaus, and that's when the second trigger for really upping our data infrastructure first, and then data analytics capabilities, because if you do it well, it's a lot of information, lot of insights, and you can start recommending really the right products very, very sharply.
That is true. No, I actually remember this instance very clearly because this was one of those periods where the importance of data engineering clearly comes out, and this was before the larger world kind of started talking about data engineering and its importance. So so clearly it was one of those.
And I remember I had requested you to come and spend a day with us to help us structure the engineering or the infrastructure part of it, because you had done it at Capcom obviously, but we had done it at Aviva again, a few years ago, and
so great. And during this period, right, what are some of the areas where you saw the biggest impact coming from, let's say, analytics, data science, machine learning? So what are some of the key problems you solved, apart from the ones which we have already discussed? Anything else which comes top of the mind?
It started to become, I think the difference and the evolution in the period was that the problems were very similar, and those were very fundamental problems. The analytics adding value in helping gain incremental advantage started to become real, because the capability started to improve in terms of our capability, and the quality of data started to improve, and the size of impact started to become larger and larger, and hence it became a virtuous circle. So whether, like I said, that what is the right lender to apply to is the most fundamental problem that continues to be very important for us. But as we scaled up, new things started emerging, like what is the propensity for a consumer to take a product, especially as we started scaling up our credit score product, which was lakhs of customers. They did not necessarily need a personal loan or a card or any other loan at that point, but they just wanted their credit score. But we knew that they will have a probability or propensity to take a credit product in future. So the propensity to take a product started to become an important problem. And then as we started scaling up our people infrastructure, we now have 3,900 people, like I said, who support or advise the consumers in completing the application form, but also in selecting how to identify and connect the right consumer with the right associate, and what are the questions that are most popular or most frequently asked by consumers, and hence what could be the right answer. Some started to become very, very significant, and then as credit score data increased, what we started doing was going back to the lender with this wealth of data, and started working with the lenders on creating an offer which was not available anywhere else in the market.
Creating a specific product for these people.
Creating a specific product with a simpler process. I mean, the consumers could still get some of those products, but they would have to, if they had to give 3 documents, we brought it down to 1 document. If it will take 3-4 days, we brought it down to the same day. It's a pre-approved offer in the financial world lingo. So started to create these pre-approved offers where the data analytics started to become even more critical, because now it was suddenly linked to credit risk also.
Correct.
And if we don't do it right, or if the lender doesn't do it right, it impacts the credit risk. So the scale and the importance of doing data analytics started to become larger. And now we are, of course, living in the world of chat GPT, machine learning. Again, I don't want to use the term machine learning very loosely. I think as an organization, we are still in infancy in terms of using machine learning. We're still trying to figure out how to use, but one of the use cases that we are working on right now, and is starting to give us initial benefits, is that imagine 4,000 people speaking to, on an average, about 20 customers a day. So that's 40,000, 80,000 customers, an average of 5 minutes, let's say, or 7 minutes or 10 minutes. So that's 500,000 minutes of call voice data every day.
Yeah.
And that starts to become massive. And there are a lot of insights in that voice conversation. But so far, we were not able to convert that voice into analyzable format. So we're starting to use machine learning now to convert the voice data into text, starting to look for the insights from that, starting to shape our right answers, starting to feedback into product development, starting to identify high risk consumers and fraud from those conversations. So there are 3-4 use cases that we are starting to identify, and they're very, very interesting, because the suddenly the data which was there not usable is becoming usable.
This almost feels like a transformation of an organization into a ML centered kind of setup, right? So obviously it would be a journey, but this is almost like the first instance of that happening.
Absolutely. And imagine from early days to now, just to give a sense, now we have about 36 million consumers who've taken our credit score product, and we have their credit report
month on month, so
updated every month. Some people have a change, some people don't, but it's still updated, refreshed every month. And on a flow basis, we get about 1.7 million inquiries for credit products and about 1 million inquiries for credit score. So A plus B on a month basis. So that's getting added to our consumer base, and hence, as we go forward, the scale, importance of data, and the need for techniques which are not as effective on a large scale of data or not as fast. I think the need for those is becoming more and more real.
So this is very fascinating. So from someone who was not even in analytics and data science to leading an organization where you have 36 million customer records getting updated month on month, 3 million roughly getting added month on month, your leadership style would have kind of evolved. And so what is your kind of leadership style today? How would your team kind of describe working with you on a day-to-day basis? And any specific, again, transformation points during this journey?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the, like I said, some of the fundamentals of the way the business works are continue to stay constant. So things like, why do we exist and why are we doing the business, and what do we need to do to continue to win on a sustainable manner, those have not changed. They have evolved. That continues to be the center of our thinking, and one of my responsibilities as a leader, and especially as the organization grows from 5-6 very core people to 50 still core people to 100 to 4,000 people now. The hardest and the most important job is to try and continue to inculcate and re-emphasize on this fundamental factor that a consumer has to be at the center of it, and why are we winning, and why would we continue to win. The role of data analytics and the importance of data analytics like I said, became, I think, super clear in my Cap 1 stint.
Yeah.
And that has really, I would think, added to my repertoire in terms of how I take decisions. And in terms of, and I think, at least I try to do that in all my leadership team and even the one downs, there is a lot of focus on using data to drive or guide your decisions. We do take decisions which are more intuition based. In some cases, we may have gone against the data, but that has to be still very, very deliberate
and hypothesis driven,
and a very hypothesis driven and a reason driven, and ability to be able to test and control. So one of my simplest way of resolving a conflict, uh, uh, or kind of addressing different views, is that my view is not superior to my team members. We both have a view, and if it happens to be different, analytics and ability to measure allows you to just test those two. And as long as you're disciplined and honest about doing champion challenger, we don't need to have, nobody needs to impose their view on the other party. And hopefully the data kind of proves which one was right. One of the interesting anecdotes, and I think one of the functions in which data analytics continues to be not as much used at all, and is brand marketing. Right? Brand build. If you think about it, it's creative, intuition, gut feel driven, and the measurement is on a unrepresentative, biased sample, non-accurate, done by parties who have vested interest. That's how the brand marketing is done. When I took on the CMO role at Paisabazaar, I remember, I was not at all from marketing or brand background, but I knew why we were doing brand. So one of the things I did, and we continue to do that very, very effectively, was bring data analytics into the way we measure brand. We of course had the advantage that we had only one shop front, which was our website, an app. I mean, still single. So every time we said that, we will not even look at an agency's data, because it's very biased, very delayed, and by that time you've already spent the brand money. But what we will do is we'll try and build our own model, which was later validated by Google when they bought a company which was trying to do that in Singapore. So that every time we run a TV advert, we are able to see the impact within minutes. And we built a model which we called as 8-minute model. So within 8 minutes of a TV advert running, we, of course, it took a lot of historical data and it became accurate over time. But within 8 minutes, we knew whether the advert is working or not. And not within 8 minutes, but very fast, within days, we knew that which parts of brand, so whether it was days, whether it was channels, TV channels, I mean,
of course,
whether it was programs, which parts were working well and which parts were not working that well. And that allowed us to take real-time decisions. And more importantly, it allowed us to stop the brand campaigns, because some of the creatives just did not work much faster than what we would have done without that data. So that's an example of how important and central the database thinking, may not be very complex modeling, is. And that's one of the, besides the consumer orientation, using data is one of the things that I try to kind of instill.
With and it, in some sense, it's actually connected to what we were discussing. So there is a lot of action happening in AI and ML space, a lot of generative tools coming out, and I think next 5 years are going to be very interesting in terms of organizations transforming and these technologies becoming center of businesses. How are you looking at it? What are some of the top of the mind priorities or thoughts you have?
So you're absolutely right, Kunal. It could, I think it's likely to turn out, it could become something like an iPhone moment for smartphone in terms of what's happening, in terms of data and AI's ability. And our job as an organization, my job as a leader is, like I said, to be very, very flexible. Do not assume that what got us here will take us forward, and continue to either upskill ourselves, or if you're running an organization or a function like I am, find people who come with the right skill to be able to help you take the benefit of that journey. But I think what it can do is, and nobody knows on how it will evolve, and what parts will it take away from humans, what part will it add to, what part it won't be able to kind of impact very soon. But it can really, really transform, improve certain aspects about how we conduct ourselves in life or in business. And as long as we are flexible and are able to get in fast and play around or test around, which is what we're trying to do. We were speaking recently about building out some skill set. What also remains true is that while the technology is emerging really rapidly, so far, to be honest, it looks like the skills are with the big tech.
Very dense.
Very, very densely with the big tech. And so it'll be a challenge, but it's important to start getting some skills. Maybe take help from those. So, for example, we work with Microsoft on Azure. And take help as much as you can get. Start to understand, even if it's not core, and be ready as it evolves. It's a very different environment. I mean, there was a time, maybe early 2000s, when things that were happening in US or UK, you had enough lead time to learn in India, and then things will happen 5 years later or 10 years later, and you can be slow initially, nobody cares. Now things are happening simultaneously. So even if we are in India, we can't sit and wait and look up to US or UK. Things will happen parallelly.
The pace of disruption, I think, in this cycle is just tremendous. And on that note, we are actually bringing back Data Hack Summit, our offline conference happening in August, and generative AI is actually the theme on it, and we are getting some very great industry speakers. So I'll share more details on that. Coming back, right? So I think you had one of this very unique journey, right? So someone who was not in analytics background, almost spent very small to almost negligible time running analytics yourself or coding, to someone who has led analytics team at scale, led data transformation and organization and its impact, right? And it's a challenge which a lot of people face in middle of their career, that they are somewhere at a managerial level, but they want to get into these tools, technologies. What advice would you have from your experience which they can kind of adopt and use?
Got it. Great. No, very, very tough question and interesting question. I'll try and break it into two parts, or rather two different segments of people. People who are in or maybe not in data analytics, but wants to get into data analytics and become the analytics leader. Versus people like me who got exposed, who are not from data analytics, like you said, got exposed to it, saw the benefit, but run a business or want to be a business or a product leader, but have to learn the importance of using data and if you're not doing it yourself, getting somebody to drive it and ask the right questions. Um, uh, so for the first one, which is a tougher one, I think, is that you have to be very clear in what you want to achieve and what you want to be as a professional. And if analytics leadership is something that you're super clear about, then there is, I think, no shortcut, to be honest. If you're at an early stage of your career, the path to convert is easier. If you're at a middle stage, the path becomes slightly more difficult. But like I said, if you want to be an analytics leader, you do have to get your hands dirty, work harder than somebody who's born and brought up, or a younger person in analytics. Identify your strengths in terms of, you know, understanding the capabilities, limitations of the tool, even if you're not. My advice is that you must learn to code.
Correct.
Even if you don't end up using it to solve problems yourself, because there's somebody who might be better. But once you learn to code, your ability to understand the capabilities, limitations are just far more better, far more nuanced, and that will help you develop as a leader, because you'll be able to ask the right questions and, more importantly, guide the team in the right direction, help them at points in time. And additionally, I think if you're not from the analytics background, you have to do these, but you also need to have very capable technical professionals in your organization, function, team, who can fill the gap, if I could call it, for the function at least. That's what I did, honestly, when I set up the analytics function. I didn't want. I was always wanting to be a business leader, but I knew that if I'm running an analytics function, I need very, very capable technical people. And that's why you, Sarvesh, came and ran the piece, and my job was just to ask the right questions, of course, and understand the capabilities and the limitation. For people who are not necessarily wanting to be analytics leaders, but want to understand and use more and more, and have ambitions in either product, technology, and business side, you have to get, be exposed to. You have to understand the capabilities of data, because if you were in mid 2000, it was an option. If you were in 2010s, you could still get away by being a leader without using too much data. As you go into 2020s, it's no longer option, and there's clear separation of people who use data for decisions and who don't. And as you go into the future, 5 years later, you will just dramatically fall behind if you haven't developed appreciation, understanding, and the benefits and the challenges of data analytics.
Wow, great. No, completely resonate with that. And on that note, finally, outside of work, how is it to meet you? What are some of the hobbies or things that you do outside of work?
Outside of work, I'm very, very easygoing. I'm I'm spending time now between Singapore and India. My family's in Singapore, so in some sense I have less time, but from another sense I have more time, because when I'm in India, my family is there in Singapore. I'm a sports fan. I watch a lot of sports. I've played sports when I was I'm still young, but I a few years earlier. I'm now trying to get better at golf. So that's a sport I play. The other sports I watch. But I love to chat, because I'm in the fintech and the startup community. I love to spend time with younger people from who are either starting up or thinking about starting up, or at different stages of startups, and benefit. I mean, those conversations are usually very, very challenging, and I think they benefit a lot to me, although the other party may not know that. They think they're getting benefited, but I do get benefited a lot. So I think those pieces are very interesting. I do try to read. Every time I read, I mean, I listen. I don't read. I use
Audible.
Audible. Read, but I try and read things which help me develop perspective. Need not be business books, but develop perspective about life, about business, about sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks a lot for your time, Naveen. Great catching up, and again, huge amount of learnings for me personally, as well as I think for the community.
Thank you, Kunal. It was a pleasure, and I hope it's useful for the audience. Thank you.
Thank you.